Hello, fiends, friends, and familiars. This is Matt Orozco, and I am once again joined with my good pal.
Lowell Greenblatt, how are you?
Hey, and it's another Macabre Monthly, episode 311, and we are actually joined by a third today, none other than the host of the Spooking Doings podcast, Rick Guzman. Rick, thank you so much for joining us and for also having us on Spooky Doings recently as well.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here, and that's what the horror community does. We put our grimy, blood-covered hands after we crawl out of some subterranean depths together, and we grasp each other's hands and we lift each other up in any way, shape, or form that we can.
I think I've seen that
Bury
movie and
each
its
other's
sequel.
bodies.
Yeah. Bury each other's bodies. Um, well, Rick, I'm so glad that you're able to join us for this episode because our topic is going to be on top five New York City horror movies, which, Rick, if those aren't familiar, is based in New York City, alongside our good friend Lowell. So we figured why not celebrate this serendipitous joining of two people that happen to be from one of the largest and most densely populated cities in the United States on the same podcast. What are the odds? But here we
Pretty
are.
fucking good, I think.
Pretty
I'd say
good.
so.
Pretty good. But Rick, we're going to get into some questions we have for you before we get into our topic. But before we do that, one of the ways we love to start these things off, and it's been a while since I yeah, February was a weird month, so let's just call it that. We weren't able to get to recording an episode, but we are back in with fervor in March. But let's start with what you've been watching. So, Rick, since you are a guest, what are some things that you've been watching that you think are worth talking about, or maybe some ones that people should avoid at all costs?
Okay, well, let's just go with today.
Okay.
Yeah, let's go with today. Um, Before we started rolling the mic, we were talking, Lowell and I, about how I used to do props and set dressing for TV shows and movies for a living. And then a pandemic happened, and then justifiable strikes happened. And now the strikes are over, but unfortunately, studios aren't really filming much, especially not in New York. So I've taken a warehouse job to, make money. And after I do like a lot of my work and the trucks have gone away and they're doing their thing, I engage in what I call fuck off time and I'll watch movies. So today I watched Face Off because it had been a while. And today I learned that Joe Bob Briggs was in Face Off.
I know, right? It just kind of hits you in the face the first time you see it. Like this
I
can't be right. What's happening here? But it is. It's happening right in front of you.
Clearly the last time I watched Face Off, I was not a fan of Joe Bob Briggs. And I came to Joe Bob late when he came to Shutter, and my girlfriend was like, "You don't know Joe Bob?" I'm like, "No," and then I quickly learned. So I watched that, and I'm like, "I know that voice, I know that face. Why is Joe Bob here?"
I'm sure under his government name, John
John Bloom, yeah,
Boom.
John
Yeah.
Bloom. Yeah, there we go.
and then I came home, and we're going to qualify this sentence so your listeners don't get the wrong idea. I watched porno. There was a movie called Porno that came out in 2019. I got
Yeah.
to see it at the Brooklyn Horror Fest. Uh, One of the actresses, Jillian Muller, was on my podcast back during the pandemic. It's a great horror comedy set in the 90s. It's like if Kevin Smith did his version of Demons, for anyone that hasn't seen it.
Good way to do
And
it.
they find a film canister, it unleashes a succubus in the theater. There's a character in it who's the projectionist, whose name is Heavy Metal Jeff. He's straight edge. He wears flannel. He's got long dark hair. He drinks his soda without ice, and he espouses wisdom on these younger people. Some of it is kind of dumb. Uh, I am far more of an atheist than he or any of the other characters in this movie are. But upon watching them, I'm like, I think I'm Heavy Metal Jeff.
Okay, so you found your
I can
your
see
your
that.
screen your screen to person pairing.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. So cheers to
That's
heavy metal
huge.
Jeff.
Yeah, that's
Nice.
huge. Lowell, what have you been up to recently? What have you been watching?
Uh, I've seen some of the new stuff that's come out, and for 2025, so far so good. I caught The Gorge on Apple Plus, the new Scott Derrickson, and it was kind of cool. It's a big old two-hander mystery. And Sigourney Weaver pops up in there for a little bit. But yeah, I was with it. It's got some great sequences. I don't think we ever need a sequel, but yeah, it was like a nice surprise. I was like, damn, this is pretty entertaining. I would have paid to see this in the theater, and that was pretty
I
cool.
I saw that too.
Yeah,
I did not have the same experience. I didn't hate it. I was like, it's very much a very fine movie.
yeah,
But I'm like, this is the most unnecessary romance I've ever seen in my entire life.
yeah. They
And
didn't need to go there with it, but yeah, I
the
know.
most interesting stuff is the stuff where they spend the least amount of time, which is like in the actual gorge itself. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's not bad. It's definitely not like, you know, it's
Mhm.
better than the average streaming
Yeah,
movie,
yeah. It's a big recommend.
which is damning it with faint praise, I realize.
Yeah. Eh. And I don't know if you guys have seen The Monkey yet, but it is one of my favorites of the year so far.
Yeah,
Have you
and
seen?
and it's only the beginning of March, but it was awesome.
I know it's like it's coming out swinging. It's crazy. Did you see it, Matt, or did you see it and not like it?
No, I'm gonna see it. I'm gonna try and see it this week.
Okay.
I feel like I actually will be the first Osgood Perkins movie that I will like
I've
outright
heard
like.
that from other people. I'm like, they're like, this is the one, and I'm like, you fools, the Black Coat's daughter. But yeah, I'm in the tank for Oz Perkins, but it is different from what he's done before, and yet it also kind of fits in its own way. And I gotta tell you, I don't know how James A. Janice is going to kill count this on the Dead Meat YouTube show because every single kill is every one. And at some point, I had to like stop myself, like, okay, is it just that I'm being like bedazzled with some of the most amazing kill scenes I've seen in a long time? Like, does the story work? Do the characters work? Am I just do I have blood goggles? You
Yeah.
know? But then I was like, no, this actually is like a good story of like fathers and sons, and everyone's doing pretty good. And I didn't know that. Not it's not really a spoiler, but Rowan Campbell from Halloween Ends is in it, and I'm like,
Hmm.
throw that kid more work. I'm a fan.
Yeah,
He
I
didn't do anything wrong in Ends except he just took the part he got,
right.
you
yeah,
know?
no, no, I like Halloween Ends, but I feel like people see that movie and they're like, you know, fuck that
He
movie and
looks like
everything.
one of the Ramones in The Monkey,
Yes,
which amused me.
yeah,
And
it's intentional
I
too.
do I do feel like Osgood Perkins tried to stack the deck in his favor to win the Chainsaw Award for Best Kill because
And I
there's a lot of them.
like believe me, the hype. Or I don't think the kills have been hyped up enough. Honestly, even though that's what people have been talking about, like you're just not ready. You're not ready for any of it, which is what I mean. Like you could just go in and not remember anything and be like, oh yeah, these kill scenes were great. But I'm like, I made myself focus. Okay, I'm with Theo James and his son, and it was good. It was really good. It's like they say like Long Legs is about like his dad, and this movie is about his mom, and I can totally see that. So yeah, I don't necessarily think it's going to be my favorite horror film of the year, but I would be surprised if it's not in the top 10, unless we have another 2022 on our hands and it's just it's anyone's ball game. But yeah, big recommend.
Cool. Well, I'll round us out here. We already talked about the gorge. I caught Smile too, which I was kind of I don't want to say dreading, but it's one of those like sometimes like okay I know I want to watch this movie, but I'm just not ready to watch it for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So one day I was like, you know what, fuck it, threw it on. And fuck, Holy shit. That's like 5 times better than the first movie. And
Yeah.
I liked the first movie quite a bit, but holy shit, that's a sequel. Um, so hell yeah, Parker Finn. I don't know if I want more of these, but you know what? If he keeps switching it up and doing something different, which sounds like he's going to be doing in the third one, you know what? I'll buy a ticket.
Is he doing a third one? Is that
Yeah, I
confirmed?
heard.
Because I
I don't
don't
know if
know.
it's super solid yet, but money talks.
Yeah, but I mean, without ruining it, even though like as soon as they said what it's about, I'm like, oh, I know how this one ends, and I was right. But like, which is cool. But like, where do you go from there, essentially? But that's not for me to figure out. That's for me to buy a ticket.
It's
So
it answers the question no one asked. What would it look like if Alex Party made a horror movie? So
Well,
um,
I've got a question regarding Smile too, because I've enjoyed the Smile movies, but a grown-up 80s slasher kid, those movies like the Final Destination films makes it look like there's no way to win.
yeah,
yeah, it's very
I like
bleak.
that's something I'm always looking for in these movies. Like, is there like is it just like a slow march into the sea, or is it like are we actually going to is there a chance for survival? And are we with the protagonist who's going to like you know, find the cure to death or find the cure to the curse or whatever it is? And more often than not, it's just like, nope, psych, which is what like the Final Destination films are. But I'm always, I'm kind of, if you like the characters, you're kind of hopeful.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
like
like,
that.
I don't know how much longevity you can get out of that, just
Right.
from my taste. For somebody else, like my creative partner Chelsea loves the Final Destination movies. I stopped at the second one, but if you dig it, and more importantly, if they're profitable, they're gonna keep making them.
Watch
Uh,
five. You can skip three and four. Watch five. You'll
Okay.
be fine. That's my recommendation.
I mean, I think it speaks to the nature of some franchises that don't necessarily have the great like they're more they're all cock no ball, like it's kind of like Terrifier, right? It's like I just like seeing those people kill those other people a lot. That's what fandom of the Terrifier movies can essentially be summed up as is I like watching that guy murder those people in those ways. Much like, the Smile movies, like I like watching these people smash themselves with egregiously heavy things and maul their like the gore work and practical effect work in Smile 2 is really what
Ugh.
is just it's not gimmicky, it's gross. And I loved it. And then the last movie I guess I'll talk about is one I reviewed for Macabre Daily, the it's called Body Odyssey, and it's probably the most grounded body horror movie I've ever seen because it doesn't actually involve any sort of unnatural well, I say unnatural in air quotes here because it's a movie about a female bodybuilder. So there's a lot of performance enhancement and kind of non-organic ways of increasing one's size, but it's body horror in the sense that it doesn't fetishize bodybuilding in a way that shows it as something rather to be attained or disgusted by, but just is. And it shows how a person's age and her desire to improve kind of gets in the way of like what might be actually best. But it's done in a very like Cronenberg Dead Ringers kind of way. So it feels very cold and clinical and well shot. So if you're into some really moody, strange, and it's got Julian Sands in one of his last roles, and I think it might be his last one. And he's pitch perfect in it. He plays the trainer Kurt, who's just, the absolute perfect Julian Sands role. He's a bit of a prick, but there's something alluring about him being that prick. So yeah, it's a weird one if you like movies that are kind of outside of the, you know, supernatural realm of horror and more into like examining just uh interesting niches of human interest, like bodybuilding communities, which are in of themselves, a totally different culture. So, anyways, those are some movies maybe to watch, maybe to not. Who knows? Make your own choices. Exercise your free will. Be a person. But Rick, speaking of free will and people,
I'm a
um,
people.
You are a people,
Yep.
and you
Yep.
have will, which we believe is free. But we got a few questions for you, just for folks that watch our show can get to know you a little bit better. And the first one being potentially the most obvious one, the one that everyone gets asked on pretty much any show their first time guest on is, how did you get started with this spooky doings thing?
Spooky Doings came about. I was performing improv uh, in New York City, taking classes at the Magnet Theater. I had paired up with one of my classmates, and we formed a duo. This talented gal, Laura Delaroto, and she wanted to go off and do other things. She's since written a book, and wish her all the success. Haven't talked to her in quite a while, but now I was looking for something else to do. And I was jumping on independent shows here and there. And there was one thing about the improv community is like whatever bar is closest to that theater is that theater's official bar. And there was a
Repeat on
bar
it.
called the Triple Crown Ale House, which was kind of situated between the Magnet Theater, the Pitt Theater, and the Upright Citizens Brigade. So they had a little space downstairs where all these independent teams or producers could put together their own shows. I was doing shows there. I got the contact information. I'm like, I got to do my own thing. And what can I do? And I love comic books, but there was already a comic book themed show at the Magnet. So scratch that. What else do I love? Horror. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a horror themed improv show. Clearly, there must be others out in the world, but at least in the area, as far as I knew, there weren't as many. So I jumped on some Facebook improv groups and put it out there. I'm like, I'm putting together a horror themed show. Who's in? And some people answered. Most notably, my partner Chelsea Bennington reached out to me, and some improvisers are just looking to get stage time. And when you ask them, "What are your favorite horror movies?" you can tell by their answer that they are looking for stage time. People that their favorite horror movie is Harry Potter. Yes, there are horror elements, but okay, you're not that deep. But when Chelsea said to me Black Christmas was one of her favorites, I'm like, real, recognize real.
Mhm.
And the show has evolved a lot over the years. And she and I started doing a podcast together. She's since left the podcast because she's involved in a lot of grant writing in her job, and she can't be talking a lot of shit on the internet if you're trying to earn money
Right.
with
Fair.
fundraising and things like that. But she's still an essential part of the improv show. We started hosting trivia events at the Necromantic Brew Company in Farmingdale, Long Island. Lowell is there frequently wins as well. Um, and that's just come about. We would attend a previous trivia events, and then that hostess left the brewery, and I asked the owner, Ralph Mandarino, hey, what if Chelsea and I took over? He said that would be great. So we bring our banter and our improvisational comedy to our hosting duties, and people seem to like it. The only one that can attest to it right now is Lowell. Lowell, what do you think about what we do?
I have a lot of fun, not just because I usually win, but yeah, they bring some zest and zeal. There are some challenging questions and not so challenging questions, but yeah, everyone seems to have a good time, and
Mm,
I'm happy to go.
thanks. We try.
Amazing. Well, since you mentioned you're a comic book fan, I'm going to ask maybe a question I didn't have planned, but you're asked to pick a team of superheroes. Does not matter what comic book background they have. You can pick from wherever you choose, but you have four. Who are you putting in your lineup?
What are we doing? Are we doing like the Yancey Street poker game, or do we have to save the world?
Um, fair clarification. We're talking superheroes here, so not so much your crumbs, but maybe uh your Ditkos.
I've always been a Marvel guy, so I'm probably going to lean heavy with that. So for just four people, I'm going to pick the damaged ones that I relate to. Daredevil, because I did 12 years of Catholic school, so he's always been one of my favorites. The Hulk, because I was very angry in my youth before I went to therapy. Um, the Scarlet Witch because she crazy.
Okay,
um,
maybe.
and number four, Lockjaw for easy transportation purposes.
Okay. I
I thought you
love
were really obligated to say Wolverine, but that's okay. For any and all Marvel teams, he just has a spot.
There was that period in the 90s where it's like, okay, we're gonna have Wolverine, Ghost Rider, or Spider-Man guest star in all these other books to increase sales.
and there were some cool offshoots from that. But yes, it became quite cross-pollinated. Um, but with that, so what's your horror movie origin story? What are the movies that got you really dialed into the genre when you were either a young buck or if you discovered it at a later point in your life? What triggered those scary feels?
I got into it as a kid because it's the 80s, it's the golden age of slashers. So between my parents not liking it and the teachers in my Catholic school not liking it and telling me I shouldn't watch that, naturally that's what I'm going to
Yep.
gravitate towards. I've always been a contrarian, and it amazes me how adults never learned with kids, like, don't tell them not to do something because then they're going to do it. Or in
Yeah,
the
make
case
it
of my
uncool.
parents, like
Yeah.
if you're going to tell me not to do something, give me a valid logical reason. I listened to that when my dad told me, like, don't do drugs. Why not? Because some are addictive and can kill you. Okay, great. Don't smoke. Same reason. He told me don't grow your hair long. I said, why not? He said, because I said so. And I grew my hair long. So there was that. So my parents, at least they didn't mind renting things for me. They would rent the Friday the 13th, the Nightmare on Elm Streets. The first date I ever went on, I took a girl to see Child's Play. Yeah, we snuck in, but that's what you had to do back then. And when you're what I affectionately refer to as a New York City rat, you find a way. You buy the ticket to the PG or PG-13 movie, and then you just waltz in to see Child's Play. And
There was a lot more honor system in those movie going days where like you bought the ticket and there was one person between you and about five theaters.
mm-hmm,
So they didn't give a shit what theater you're going into because they were getting $2.15 an hour.
mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, nowadays it's a bit more
Now with the signed seats, it's more difficult. And it was back then, it was before they would stagger the times so that like you couldn't justifiably walk into one theater when you bought a ticket for another. And back then, it was like everything started pretty much at the same time. So everything was busy. And then everything started, and then the staff would have their downtime until everything let out simultaneously, and the next show would come in. So it was very easy at my local theater to sneak into shit.
What
yeah.
was your local theater? Can I ask?
It was the movie world at Douglaston.
Oh yeah, that's not far from where I grew up. Yeah, a lot of good memories there. And then just one day it closed, and now
Mhm.
it's like a cave in the middle of a shopping center. It's
Yeah.
like you like Matt. Just to describe this, the shopping center is like on the side of a hill, and like you had like Kohl's and I think Toys R Us up top. You had a supermarket down below, but in the back, past the supermarket, you never know what was there, is a movie theater. And
Wow.
like it just there had to have been mold there constantly because it felt so deep underground that it was like the people who worked there never saw the sun. But I did see Star Wars Episode One and Scott Pilgrim there.
But
Wow.
well, you knew it was there because you'd have like the big multiplex sign along the
Yeah,
service
that's true.
road
Mm-hmm.
of the highway. But again, back in the day, you could, or I could and have spent an entire day there of like buying
Mm-hmm.
one ticket and then just hopping the
Yeah,
rest of the day.
Fresh Meadows movie theater did that all the time. You get a movie theater that's like you get your ticket and then there's just a hallway You're just going back and forth. You're fine. I mean,
Personally, I
unless you
would love
don't.
it if Amazon bought this space because there's a vacant Toys R Us up above and made Alamo Queens, but
Uh, be still my heart. I'm like 5 minutes away from there. I would live there. I do. I'd get a timeshare. Are you kidding? Like,
you can move into the vacant Macy's next door.
I could. It'll
You
be
felt
all mine.
Yeah, fulfill your Dawn of the Dead cosplay fantasies, and then go see the movie next door. Um, well, Rick, what's a movie that you would die on a hill for?
Younger Rick must have had a better answer for this. Old man Rick is like what you like. I'll like what I like. I don't need to die on anything. We can agree to disagree. But that's not good. That's not a good answer for a podcast.
Give us young
So
stupid Rick, damn it. Stupid Rick.
so I'll
Stupid
tell
Rick.
you a disagreement that Chelsea and I have had. Um, she was ranting about how stupid the movie Dead Silence was. And after a long harangue, I said, I liked it, which I did upon viewing it, but then I saw it in a way that made it better. Um, Years back, right after Christmas, a stomach bug that ripped through my family. And it's a reason why you should avoid family gatherings when you're kissing on people, especially post pandemic. So the day after Christmas, it hit me. I went to work and I felt fine. And then an hour and a half later, I did not feel fine. And I came home and I'm feverish and I'm quaky and my body is not right. And I just put on the DVD of Dead Silence. And my beautiful lady was kind enough to bring over some Gatorade. She let herself in. And I'm kind of dozing. And I hear, oh my God. And she's found me on the couch, all curled up and shivering. I thank her for the Gatorade. I take a sip, and it's the scene where that clown puppet is there, and it tells our protagonist that, Mary Shaw killed his wife and unborn kid. And I'm terrified of clowns. So I just look at it and I go, fuck you, clown baby. I'll fight you. So that's I don't like to use the word what is it, guilty pleasure. I like to use unpopular opinions, and that's one of my unpopular opinion films. I like it. I own it. I'll watch it every once in a while and have a chuckle. And if a lot of people don't like it, that's okay. We can still be friends because in the horror community we're going to find common ground someplace.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably the most underseen James Wan film in his filmography. Um, but yeah, I'm not I am a fan. Um, I'm not like Sink Tell It on the Mountain fan, but I bought the 4K and you know what? It was a good watch. It was a good rewatch.
It's some
There's some
fun little movie.
Yeah, some good imagery. I think it has I think it has the same thing that a lot of just supernatural movies issues have about just trying to do a lot with a very simple story. Because it throws in the Mary Shaw, you have this ventriloquist dummy, but the parts make a great whole. So, um,
And as an older fella who did not like the New Kids on the Block when I was going through puberty because all the girls in class loved them, when I get to see a member of that boy band perish in a horror movie, I'm a happy guy.
there. I mean, no right stuff for you, that's for sure.
Nope,
Nope.
Uh,
I ain't the one.
all right, so this is more of a this or that, but John Carpenter or Wes Craven?
You're a dick.
I'm gonna go with Wes because I went to Nightmare on Elm Street first. So he's got longer residence in my heart than John Carpenter.
there are no wrong answers to that
There are
question.
no wrong as many of John Carpenter's soundtracks and scores I have on vinyl. You never forget your first love. So Wes got there first with Nightmare on Elm Street.
No, he's touched a lot of people's hearts first. So, um, all right. And I got two more for you. This one's real quick. Licorice or popcorn when you watch a movie?
Popcorn with Old Bay on it for extra spice.
Okay.
Ooh.
I see. I'm a big fan of bringing, or not bringing, but like if you can add some seasoning to your popcorn at home. Any, butter's good, but throwing in something else like some rosemary, garlic, I'm with you, Rick. Something to just
Mm-hmm.
kick it up a notch. Lowell, what about you though? Are you a popcorn or a licorice guy?
I go for licorice more because I like popcorn, but I find like when I have the movie theater popcorn, by the end of it, I'm just like, because you're eating it and it tastes like air, but like it doesn't settle until later.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, licorice is that's kind of the only time I have Twizzlers is at the movies. So yeah,
To that end, red vines or Twizzlers.
get the fuck out of my house, Twizzlers.
Wow.
Red
Okay.
vine.
He,
What
Um,
he's not in your house.
I well, then get out of my mind. No, no,
well,
no red vines. I don't like red. There's a time and a place for red vines, but like if you want licorice, you have Twizzlers. If you want red vines, you have red vines.
this feels like a Miracle Whip mayonnaise conversation, but I'm not going to go you any further on this because this is about Rick. All right. Um,
This sounds like when people like talk about sports in my vicinity. I'm like, I don't even know what this argument is about.
well, I mean, I feel like licorice is not one of the go-to snacks it used to be in the theater, but I feel like for a certain kind of film goer who went to the theaters a lot as a kid and is around our age, licorice was one of the things that made the rounds. But last question for you, Rick, is there a movie out there that you think is woefully underseen that more people should go out and watch?
There must be, and there it is. Um, Psycho Gorman is the movie that I say is the greatest film of all time. Um, Now, it may not be my favorite film of all time, but it is a movie that I watched. The next morning, I bought the DVD, I bought the vinyl, and I show it to people because, as a lover of horror and comedy, just the premise of a 10-year-old girl somehow getting dominion over this violent alien, it's hilarious and wonderful, especially like how she's the younger sister, but somehow is abusive as hell to her brother. And it's funny, it's gory, there's practical effects. It's like nothing I've ever seen before.
Have you seen
And
Frankie Frico?
yes, that I bought the DVD sight unseen
Yeah.
because I'm like, oh, he's got another movie and it's available on, I think I got it through Shout, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm like, add to cart. Done deal.
Shabadoo. I mean,
Exactly.
he's
Chalamet.
a he's a great Steven Costanzi can keep making movies and I hope they keep giving him money to do it. But Rick, thank you so much for giving us a little bit about yourself, some things that people should champion, and of course, make sure it's popcorn and Wes Craven for the man. Now, on to our main bout of the evening is our top five New York City horror movies. Now, I can only attest to living in New York City for 2 years, so I will not go as far as to say that um, I am by any means a New Yorker, but
The
I did
smell
pay
never comes off.
taxes.
You're tagged for life, sir.
Well, yeah, but it's because even when you move, you still owe taxes for the previous year to New York. So like a herpes flare up, it will always remind you at the worst possible times that it's there. But nevertheless, I thought it was a good chance for us to talk about some New York-based horror movies, give our top five. Um, Before we get into them, gentlemen, was this hard? Was this a hard assignment? Was this rather easy, somewhere in the middle? What say
It
you
was
all?
easy for me because I agree with what Garth Ennis wrote in Preacher Comics. Any story that takes place in New York seems believable to me. And it's maybe because I was born and raised here. But for whatever movie in any genre, it could be The French Connection, it could be When Harry Met Sally, it could be Mimic with the giant cucarachas. It all seems plausible in my head.
Yeah, especially if you've lived in New York for like and actually paid rent there. Not like I lived there for a month. Like you've paid rent. I feel like yes, you see things that defy lots of stuff.
Pizza Rat alone. My God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, Preacher is one of my favorite comics. I used to say
Yep.
it's like my favorite. It was my favorite comic that has like a beginning, middle, and end, like not an ongoing, but just TV show, not so much.
I agree.
The
I was
second they said it was going to
excited.
be on AMC, the second I knew it was
Yeah,
doomed.
Yeah.
yeah.
I,
But I will say, Hairstar, Tulip, and Cassidy, amazing, amazing to perfect. Jesse was miscast, and if you miscast Jesse, then you're fucked. But
what I didn't like in that first season, it made it seem like Jesse and Tulip did not love each other at all. And that love story, even when they have their problems, permeates it all. But for me, that came out and I started reading it right after my dad died, who was a big John Wayne fan. And as I've mentioned, I've got my issues with the church, being raised in it for as long as I was. So that was the perfect thing for me at the time, and that's why that's my favorite comic book series.
Yeah.
So, had there not been a comic book improv show at the Magnet Theater at the time I was looking for something, we may not be having this conversation right now.
I mean, yeah, but a butterfly shits. Are you hearing something, Lowell?
no, I'm looking. I was going to show you my R Space Funko Pop, but yeah, never mind. Humperdew, what you're going to
Yeah.
do?
There you go.
Yeah.
Well,
So to answer your question, this wasn't too hard. I did have a few that were solid. I did have to round it out a little bit, but it also made me think that like I'm aware of a lot of New York horror film, like New York set and based horror films that I haven't seen. So I definitely need to like expand my palette a little more. And then I did go to try to expand my palette a little more with some entries that I think you guys have chosen. I don't know. And I was like, yeah, no. I'm good with mine. Though I know I still have to branch out. I just hit some hurdles. But yeah.
I appreciate you being okay with going outside of the comfort zone, just putting a rope on the harbor so you can pull yourself back in. Um, well, let's get to them. So, Rick, would you like to do us the honor of, and these we don't have to go in any specific order, whatever, if you want to put yours in some sort of ranked fashion as the most New York movie to the least New York, that is you okay. But if you just want to do them informally and let chaos reign as Lowell likes to, then by all means,
I
that's
actually did have them in order. So I've got my top five, and I'll start with number five. And I'm going to preface this with um, your listeners are very likely to disagree with me, and I understand why. Their reasons are justified, and that's okay. These are my opinions. This is my list. I'm not forcing it on anybody. Number five is Ghostbusters.
iconic.
For
Right.
it. Yeah, it counts.
Very funny. Um, and while I do love pissing off men of my generation by saying I like the Lady Ghostbusters more.
It's better than those last two. I
Right.
gotta say, because it remembers it's a fucking comedy instead of a
Right.
comic book movie. Of course, I say that like I'm a Ghostbusters fan, which I'm not, but I just recognize it's more of a Ghostbusters film. Anyway, go on.
Yep.
Right. Like my generation, Generation X, for all of our mm, I'd say we're some like at least the people that I grew up with, we were very liberal of the grunge era. But the fandom of my generation, the male fandom of my generation, are some of the most awful people online that will harass stars of a Star War. I'm not a fan because my parents didn't buy me all the toys, so I didn't get indoctrinated like that. But the ones that shat on the Lady Ghostbusters before it even came out, no. But where the original is superior is New York is a character in that movie. It's shot in New York. The Lady Ghostbusters has some stock footage establishing shots. It's not filmed there, you can tell. But this one, the laughs are there. It's it's as essential to the movie as any of the actors are. The exteriors are great. You can tell it's as important a part to the tale as anything else, and it just works for me.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Especially how it captures New York in its essence. So, Lowell, what is your first pick?
I didn't necessarily rank these because the quality's all over the place. But this one might be a bit of a curveball, but I stand by it, and that's The Devil's Advocate. Um, right?
I thought I was the only one that liked that movie.
I I love that movie. I don't give a damn. That Al Pacino is the devil, just Al Pacinoing all over the place. Like, come on. And it counts as a horror movie. I mean, he's the devil. He's doing devil shit. But yeah, it just
Horror Light.
yeah, it counts.
It
It
counts.
definitely
It
counts.
counts.
You've got it's a very mid to late '90s, sort of a pre-fame Charlize Theron, um, some weird CGI morphing that they thought was top of the line, but no one thought it could get better. But yeah, just like a sneaky, erotic, insidious thriller with writhing statues and incest and heaven and hell. Just love it.
And Pacino cranked to 11
Oh yeah,
for so much of that movie. And again, going back to the former Catholic school kid, his version of the devil just works for me. Whereas, like, like God's a sadist. He sets the rules in opposition. Look,
an
but
absentee
don't touch.
landlord. Yeah,
Touch, but don't taste. Taste, don't swallow. And when you're leaping from one foot to the other, he's up there laughing his sick fucking ass off. And
I
scene.
I still prefer De Niro's interpretation of Satan in Angel Heart, only
Loose
because the egg,
cipher, a little on the
yeah,
nose.
um, mostly because the egg and the fingernail thing just really gets to the heart of something weird. But yes, it is Al Pacino. If anyone wondered if no one was surprised by the Dunkachino commercial if you've seen any Al Pacino movie prior. So we know he's had it in him. Um, all right, I start with one of my first. Again, I didn't rank mine per se because I can't attest to how New York one of these is over the other. But I'm gonna go. I feel like there's three people that I have to include in my list: Lustig, Cohen, and Henenlotter.
yeah,
And so
there
I'm
it is.
getting one out of the way. Cohen with God Told Me To. Um, if you've ever seen King Cohen, the documentary about Larry Cohen, it's a fascinating look at what used to be possible for independent filmmakers in New York City. He would literally just go and steal shots in the middle of like active police drills and parades and just place his actors in there. So much of this footage he got just came from not asking and just doing it. So, and God Told Me To has some pretty fascinating shots. I believe this is the one that has the police officer assassination shot that he almost got arrested for. Um, and it's not just that, it's a great fucking movie. It's a really weird fucking movie too. But if I'm gonna, when it comes to Larry Cohen in New York movies, it's either that or Q, and I had to go with God Told Me To. So
I almost
that's
had you on mine.
yeah. I mean, you can't. It's hard to separate Cohen in particular from New York, but also those like Q in particular because of just the interesting, it's his Godzilla movie, um, with Michael Moriarty playing the least least interesting protagonist ever. but
Well,
it doesn't
I've
matter.
just added God Told Me to the list because I've seen the cover a million times, but I've not watched this one. So I will check it out.
I feel like just based on what I know about you thus far, Rick, and your uh, atheist approach, you might get a kick out of this because it's very much about religious fanaticism at its absolute murderous best.
Um,
So
right up my alley.
exactly, it's the nice watch for the family that's woke. But for your fourth pick in your list, Rick, what is your number four New
We're gonna
York
leave
movie?
Manhattan, go a little bit north with Vampires versus the Bronx. Um,
Okay.
a lot of people could interpret this as a more modern day Lost Boys, which it is. But the thing about it having that New York feel to it, you've got your barrio folk. And regardless of which of the five boroughs you're in, you're always going to find a corner bodega. And you're always going to find the kids that come in, chop it up with the owner, and they know the kids, they know their parents, they know them by name. There's always going to be somebody either outside or maybe inside if it's cold, telling a story about how they nearly died, talking shit. They know everybody that comes in and out. They're leery of people that they've never seen before. But even that shit talking person with the cigarette is going to extinguish it when the old lady from the neighborhood comes in, gets her groceries, and they're going to offer to carry it home for them. So that essence is there as this community comes together to stop this vampiric infestation as the kids are watching Blade and they're the first ones to figure it out. And you've got Method Man as a priest, which just tickles me for some reason. So if you haven't seen that one, check it out.
That one's going on my watch list. I remember it, but I just did not watch it. And because streaming services are terrible for reminding you that they've churned out content before, it just gets lost in the deep vacuum of scrolling. So, good reminder. Thank you, Rick. Lowell, what is next up on your list of New York centrified horror movies?
Let's see. And yeah, I remember seeing Vampires versus the Bronx over COVID, but like a lot of movies I watched over COVID that came out, I got the brain scramblies about it. So
Mm-hmm.
I need to go back and watch. But for my next one, I'm going with Cloverfield, a movie that's so good it makes me forget how much I hate J.J. Abrams. Um, hate is hate is a
It's a
strong
I
word.
strong
was
word.
about to say,
It's a strong word, but he's so soft and squishy. You can't hate him too much. Um, I do hate how the word Cloverfield is just being attached to whatever the hell, and now it's a Cloverfield movie, whatever that means. I'm not a giant monster movie guy. I'm not really a found footage guy, but this movie is incredible. It tells us everything we need to know. Um, you get involved with the characters, which I find is usually very difficult to do in found footage movies, unless it's like a few of them in like an isolated area like Blair Witch. But you're just with it. It's scary. It's exciting. It just works all the way to the end. Um, yeah, and I feel like it's one that people don't necessarily think of when they think of New York horror, but like yeah, for a certain time, and a lot of these are like time periods, like New York in the '90s, New York in the 2000s. This is very New York in the 2000s, but I dig it.
Yeah, hard to disagree.
uh, I find it easy to disagree just because of I didn't like the marketing that it was so vague and J.J. Abrams was guilty of this. He'd
Yeah,
give the audience a little something and let them run with it and build speculation. But the reason why I didn't like it, and I don't know what this says about me, um, but you've got the party where like it's you find the tape and this guy has recorded the party over his like one night. He finally hooked up with his good friend, and now he's gonna fuck off to a job in Japan. It's not working out. There's tension. There's awkwardness. She shows up to his going away party with another dude. The alien invasion happens, and she calls him for help. And this lovelorn man is going to risk life and limb to get across Manhattan, not just his and others, and save this lady. And there's something about me that would just say, "Nah, I'm good. We had our moment. You got your new man. He can help you out. I'm gonna get on this helicopter over here." Now, I've been with my lady for a long time, and if it was her calling me, yeah, I will traverse a subway tunnel full of space doodle bugs to save her. Not somebody I just hooked up with one time.
But they were friends and they were in love. Yeah, I can't really follow you there, but I dig.
Yeah, I mean, people do a lot less for much less much less horny reasons. So,
True, true, very true.
um, I think for my next one, I'm gonna go with one that feels like a bit of a cop out to some extent, only because it just, you know,
It's not a
sewers are one of
cop
the
out. It's
most
your opinion. Be
well,
be,
yeah,
be
but you know,
proud.
I,
Own it.
I own my choice. I'm not embarrassed of my decisions as much as I am more just like, wish there was something that I felt represented better, but you know what? Nothing does it better than Chud. Um, it's sewers, it's weird, it's gross. If you've ever wondered what the smoke coming out of the New York City fucking sewers are, you have no one knows. Everyone has a theory, but everyone no, it just steam because it doesn't always smell like steam, but you know, there's just an allure of what exists under the subways and the sewer systems of New York City that I think is such a perfect palette for horror. And you know, Chud, I think, is sometimes like fondly remembered, but often not for people aren't sure why. Because it's kind of slow. Like it's not the most intense movie. But what it does very well is it's got a very great performance, especially of Daniel Stern, who just kind of plays this like eccentric, like not, you know, guy working in this shelter. And I think it grabs this part of I think what it focuses on in New York is what I think when New York works best is either focusing on the most affluent and awful or the most kind of blue collar and normal. You know, like just the regular folk in New York are tend to be the most interesting or the most eccentrically wealthy. Um, so I think Chud in many ways works so well just because it has so much of that very grounded New York feel. But it also shows a part of New York I wasn't alive to experience the very early 80s. So being a mid 80s baby. But yes, that's Chud.
I recently rewatched this, and I don't love it, but what I do love about it is that it did portray the homeless people of New York as people, which
Right.
is essential. And I don't know if you know about this, but a while back, a little less than a year ago, Daniel Stern was on What the Fuck with Mark Maron. He owns the stage rights to Chud and is
Really?
working with CeeLo Green to make it into a musical.
Wow.
Did we learn nothing from Bud the Chud? Did we learn? I mean, I guess I'm not gonna hate on something I don't know anything about yet. But what I will say is this is a musical of Chud. That's fat. It's a really interesting idea. I don't I don't know what to make with it, but I'll
I'll
see it.
check it out just because it's so fucking weird.
Yeah, no, I mean it's a definitely a curio. Like if I was in New York and I was able to go see it, I think it'd be on the list of things I'd want to check out. But
Yeah.
um I don't see it making the rounds to the Pantages in LA. So I think it might just be content as a
Daniel Stern does reside in California, so you can never say never.
that's true. We don't know. Well, Rick, that brings us to our midway point in our list. What's your number three New York City horror flick?
This is one I found recently, and I just loved the absurdity of it. Lucio Fulci's New York Ripper.
Oh,
I
yes.
just watched that the other day for the first time. Didn't make the list, but
Ah,
it's when the deuce was the deuce, just full of filth, flarn, filth, and perverts and whatever, and a serial killer that talks like Donald Duck. I only watched it twice, but that's enough to get it in the number 3 spot.
Uh, I mean, Rick, this is on my list, so I'm just going to call it right now that no one makes New York look grosser than Lucio Fulci. I think he actually hates the city because whenever he shoots in New York, nothing good happens there. Everything looks like trash. He never shoots Manhattan like skylines. He shoots like the skyline you get to like looking over New Jersey. Like he just yeah, I think Fulci really had it in for New York, but he loved shooting his 80s movies there. So who knows? Who knows what the strange connection is, but could not agree more.
And there were issues with New York at that time. It was not the Disneyfied area that it is now, for good or bad. So he was working with what he worked with what he had.
Yeah.
There is
Um,
some. I'll say that.
the movie,
Yeah, I feel like I know it's set in New York and there are obviously scenes shot in New York, but I feel like anytime he could shoot a scene in Italy, he would.
Mhm.
oh,
That's the
for
sense I'm
sure.
watching that.
Oh, for sure. And that's what makes it an unequivocal New York movie is that so many movies that are in New York actually aren't shot in New York. They're shot in Toronto or a soundstage.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but anyways, yeah, that was on my list. So we'll move over to Lowell. You're number three.
We're edging the cliff for films that would be considered highbrow. We'll get to the lowbrow shortly, but I deep in my soul, I really consider this more of a comedy, but it does count and it is great, and that's American Psycho, which is
Counts.
yeah, New York in the '80s, just Christian Bale. Like I know he won an Oscar eventually, but this performance is just mwah. Um, just a ridiculous, insane portrayal of '80s yuppies. That's yeah, it feels like there's another film on the list later on where it kind of shows New York as hell, but this just feels like a very specific hell where Patrick Bateman is just like free to run around. Like it's his world. We're just like visiting it. And yeah, who amongst us hasn't worked out to Texas Chainsaw Massacre? I mean, come on.
It's a rite of passage to be quite honest, but
Yeah.
I think the most impressive thing about American Psycho is much like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas or Requiem for a Dream, it has found a way to make something to transfer this medium into something totally different and somehow make it remain intact the most important parts, which are the satire and the commentary and the social commentary on like the culture of excess that the 80s ushered in and
Yeah.
the 90s just proliferated in. But yeah, I and also just that, you know, hell yeah, Mary Herron. Mary
Yeah.
Herron made a more with more balls than most men were. So, you know, fuck yeah.
Yeah. She
Um,
understood the assignment. I think I can't imagine. I know Luca Guadagnino's doing a new version, and I'm sure that's going to be great. But I still think that's going to be a Luca Guadagnino film. Whereas she like came to the book and she's like, "I got this. I know the book. Let's do it."
yeah. Even the ending, which is like you could fire up a blunt and just have a conversation around what the ending of American Psycho is about.
Mhm.
And you'll just get some real rabbit hole discussions there. But
Yeah,
I digress. Rick, we are entering our final phase, our numero doses.
And here's where people are going to get upset with me, and they're right to do so, because my last two movies are not fully set in New York, but it's the imagery that makes me put them in the number 2 and number 1 spot. And if you disagree with me, that's okay. I get it. But for me, there are few visuals more iconic than Jason Voorhees wandering around Times Square and the New York subway. So Jason Takes Manhattan is my number 2 New York film. As preposterous as so much of it is, uh, of him getting onto this cruise ship and taking people out and then sinking it and then presumably walking along the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean until he shows up in New York and eventually gets vanquished because the New York sewer system gets filled with toxic waste at the same time every night. Yeah, sure, I buy it. Why not? Why not? That wouldn't surprise me if Eric Adams does that. But Kane Hodder in Times Square, full regalia. It makes perfect sense to me when it came out, and it still makes sense to me now. It's the sight of it, the visual that speaks in the language of cinema. To me, that's undeniable. And I know people say like, no, it's not fully in New York. Okay, yeah, you're not wrong. Just my opinion.
Nope, it's got it in the title. So, and it spends about half the film's runtime in New York. So counts.
Okay.
Um, Lowell.
Can't believe you're gonna make me go back and watch Jason Takes Manhattan. That's one.
I'm not
I
making you do
no,
anything.
no, I know, but your words have inspired me.
Oh, okay, cool.
But I did a rewatch of all of the Friday the 13th films before the remake came out. But when I got to eight, I was like, even though I'd seen it before, but like having ingested so much of it already, by the time it got to that one and it's not the best one, I was like, eh. Um,
I like eight better than seven.
that's fair. That you get a lot more Kane Hoddering around, and honestly, he saved that franchise. As much as I love six, like you know, he is the Jason that we all know and love.
Mhm.
By the way, you better believe I pre-ordered Jason X and Jason Goes to Hell in 4K, which I never thought I'd do because I kind of thought I had the definitive editions, but nope, going on my shelf. Um, but what was I saying? Okay, next. So I no aspersions, but I would imagine if these aren't on my last two, if they're not on your list, they're close. Uh, Speaking of New York being a hellish playground for an insane killer, Maniac, Bill Lustig. Except instead of like the yuppified '80s New York, it's just the New York that's you know all almost Gotham City esque, just a veritable nightmare where the scare it's already scary and the scariest thing in it is Joe Zito. Man, this movie is yeah, I could have sworn it was a Fulci movie, but it's not. It's Bill Lustig, and Bill Lustig fucking rules. But yeah, I mean,
Amen.
Maniac. We warned you not to go out at night. Like, come on, you know it.
I mean, this is on my list as well, so I'm just going to talk about it now. I think the other movie on your list, Lowell, is likely the movie that's next on mine. So I'll move things around, but yeah, Maniac is just pure. Like when I watched the Joker movie, the first thing I thought of was like, man, Todd Phillips really liked King of Comedy, and he really liked Lustig's Maniac. Like those are just the two things he's aping on, verbatim. And I think you're right about the way New York is like, in kind of like what you said, Rick, about New York being a character in Ghostbusters. Like that movie couldn't take place anywhere else. Just like Maniac couldn't take place in any other city except New York because of how uniquely New York the situations and the living situations are, and like the look of everything and the eccentricity of people. And it's the kind of thing where you look at it, you're like, this looks like a hyper vision, like realized version of New York. It's like, no, that's one of 15 people you're likely to run into on the subway, like at any given time. So yeah, I think and again, like I mentioned earlier, there's three people, that are kind of like the three exploitation filmmakers of New York City, and of course Lustig being one of them, and Maniac being, I believe, it was either this or Maniac Cop, and both of them have the Maniac in them, but they both do a good job representing facets of New York and just the look of New York very, very well. Which now brings us to our number ones, the numero unos, the crowning, the pizza rat of our New York list. Um,
I Before I tell you my number one, I want to give Joe Spinell his flowers in Maniac, because while
Joe
in
Manel,
my
not Joseph.
heart
Sorry.
he's always gonna be Chi-Chi in Godfather 2, but in Maniac he's cranking the volume up as far as it can go for what starts out as seedy and then becomes fucking bonkers. Uh, and yeah, it's very good.
He's so sweaty in that movie. It's just you can. It's like if there was
Got
if the
it.
mo if it's like the movie equivalent of a wet white under like a grimy undershirt like that Joe Spinelli
Yes,
was wearing. That's what
that,
Maniac is. It's a
that's
worn Joe
very
Spinell undershirt.
it's very succinct, and yeah, it is. It New York's in the summer, particularly at that time when people didn't have the luxury
Yeah, no
of
AC.
full air conditioning. You just had like your window unit, maybe. Yes, that's very appropriate. So again, for my number one, same issue with Jason Takes Manhattan in that the film is not fully set in New York. And it's also directed by Lucio Fulci. Yes, we go to the island of Matul. Yes, we have a zombie fight a shark in one of the greatest scenes ever in all of cinema, even if
Yep.
that shark was doped out its ass. Um, but the zombies walking across the Brooklyn Bridge, clearly no one is stopping traffic, and New Yorkers wouldn't stop anyway for an Italian production filming its climactic shot of the movie. But I love Zombie or Zombie 2, whatever you feel like calling it. It's bookended in New York. And for me, that visual stays in my brain more than a shard of wood going through that lady's eye that gives everybody uh, the chills up and down their spine. There's just something so awesome about a cadre of zombies just shambling into Manhattan across the bridge. Not too dissimilar from people that probably make that walk on their commute because it's cheaper than taking the subway every day. If you can do it, if where you live
It's a
in
long
Brooklyn
walk.
is close enough to where you work in Manhattan, why wouldn't you? But that's always it for me. And yeah, it very small portion is in New York, but I love it regardless. And you can tell me I'm wrong, and I'll agree.
Well, I always like to think that Lucio Fulci's horror movies are what an 8-year-old would do if given all the budget they possibly could, because his ideas are not really bound by some sort of narrative thread so much as they are just moment to moment shocks with just a little bit of, exposition to keep you interested. And I
Okay,
say this as a lover of Fulci's brand of weird.
I'm glad you mentioned an 8-year-old because there's another New York film. It's not a horror movie, but have you heard of New York Ninja?
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
Right.
baby.
When I heard about this movie and then I watched it and then I learned that they lost the sound and had to come up with the story. But being that it was filmed when I was 8 years old, that movie is exactly what I would have come up with if someone pulled me out of my third grade class and said, "Hey, Rick, direct a movie about a ninja in New York." That's what my 8-year-old brain would have come up with
Yeah.
in 1984.
If someone like cross pollinated Sam Furstenberg's sperm with some like New York embryo, that's what you get is New York Ninja. Um, so I recommend the Vinegar Syndrome still has an amazing 4K edition of it out there, which is absolutely bonkers to think that a movie like that has such a pristine and outstanding edition that you can add to your shelves.
Because also, you're younger. You don't know how many ninjas there were in the 80s. They were everywhere.
Yeah.
Oh well, I was old enough to have an affection for them in the early 90s. So the canon movies struck so the Ninja trilogy over here is in good
American
company.
1 to 5, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's just so many. But alas, Lowell, what is your number one New York? I think I know what it is. And probably gonna be same as mine.
Yeah, I mean, no judgment if it's not, but I mean, I just figure it would be on someone's list, and that is Basket Case.
Yep.
Um, my God. And I didn't see it until like 10 years ago at Dismember the Alamo. I'd heard of it, but I'd never actually seen it, and it was spectacular. Um, yeah, just I don't also not a New York that I knew, just one that I like saw in movies, but god damn, just a camp fest. Just the hairstyles, the grit, the grime, the $5 character actors, the stop motion. My God, I mean, I went to an event recently. I have the Arrow edition; it's beautiful. But I went to an event with Adam Caesar, who wrote Clown in the Cornfield. He did an event called Dark Sparks at the Brooklyn Horror Society, where he does a reading from his new book, and then he shows a film. And the film he chose was Basket Case. And like we didn't, I think we didn't know if it was going to snow that night. So I think he talked about it. He did a reading, and then he's like, "Okay, I think I have to go because of the weather, because I live a little far, but enjoy Basket Case." And he did stay till the end, it turns out. But I just thought it would have been so funny to be like, "All right, here's Basket Case, goodbye." just like just a mic drop moment, like, "Yeah, you guys haven't seen Basket Case before? All right, well, have fun, goodbye." And then you remember that man forever, just like you remember that movie forever. Yeah, just you don't necessarily think you're gonna see old New York, like a one of the ultimate 80s old New York horror movies when you go to see a movie about, a freak in a basket. But yeah, as the kids say, it didn't have to go that hard. And it does, and we're better for it. Basket.
I love Basket Case. It's such a first of all, just the sound that Belial makes is I want that to be a ringtone. It's and it's just it there's it's I don't know. I don't love every Frank Henenlotter movie, but I do appreciate everything he does. And I think one can make an argument that you could put almost any of his movies in here, like Brain Damage or Frankenhooker, and they would all be good proxies for New York City because the man is just a chunk of the sidewalk. Um, but I think this one more than any of them epitomizes just the grime of a street of a 42nd Street I didn't know, but I'd only heard about and could only see about in documentaries and read about in books. But he made it feel real, just like kind of how Maniac feels like a sticky, hot New York night. Basket Case feels like you signed up for the wrong hotel on Expedia because you took that mystery deal, and you got the basket case room, that with Brother Belial in his basket. And the fact that this movie has also been preserved by the Modern Museum of Art was a finance restoration was put together by them. It's in the Library of Congress as an important American film work. Um, what better thing to be than not just reflective of New York, but also be a horror movie? So perhaps it's serendipity we end on Basket Case because it has such a great representation. But all these movies, Zombie being one of my personal favorite films, and Rick, if you get a chance to see Fabio Frizzi do his live version, 10 out of 10 recommend.
I would love to.
Yeah, he's touring again with it. Um, Amazing man, one very good English. So beat him, talk to him. But now that we've reached the end of our lists, Rick, where can folks find you on the internet? Where can they listen to the Spooky Doings podcast? Give them all the details and the information.
Spooky Doings podcast, you can find it on Apple, Spotify, Podbean. You can go to Spooky Doings Improv on Facebook, where you'll get information about our shows. We don't have anything booked at Young Ethel's in Brooklyn at the time that we're recording this, but when we do, that'll be where it's announced first. You can check out Spooky Doings on Instagram. I'm at Rick Guzman 718 on Blue Sky. I host horror trivia with my partner Chelsea at the Necromantic Brew Company on the first Sunday of every month, except for May. That's May 4th. They want to do Star Wars stuff, and I'm not that kind of nerd. So in May, we'll be doing horror trivia on May 18th. Come check us out. We start at 2 o'clock. prizes are compiled from a whole bunch of places. Screenbox sometimes. The George A. Romero Foundation has donated some prizes, and just stuff that I find in my travels once in a while, or that Ralph, the owner, finds, and you get to take home goodies if you win, if Lowell isn't around.
I give away the stuff I don't want.
You do, you do. This is
I'll
true.
put it that way.
The benevolent winner.
But I will.
There's also dogs. You can pet the dogs.
Yes, they are adorable. I will say yesterday I got everyone who played got a free month of Screambox, which was pretty rad. So I'm kind of digging through that, and yeah, it's all the more reason to stop on by. Good beer, good folks, good ambiance. You know,
And if you're like me and you don't drink beer, you can grab a Pepsi,
that's true. They have non-alcoholic drinks as well. They
which
have
I appreciate. A lot of breweries don't care about the designated driver. And
no,
like
they're
you're on your own. Maybe they'll have water.
yeah,
But Ralph will just slide me a can of Pepsi and then I'll do my thing.
they are fully friends of Macabre Daily. We love them. If I lived closer, I would be there every goddamn weekend. But I love them. One of my favorite spots, Necromantic.
Well, I thank you so much, Rick, for joining us on this episode. I hope to have you back again. And everyone, check out Spooky Doings. Check if you're in the New York City area, Long Island area, first Sunday of every month, except for May, which on the 18th, you can join this the horror trivia, as long as Lowell's not there, because apparently he's trivia king. But you know what? I know that you're enjoying that Screenbox subscription, Lowell, which is why next month I'm going to make you talk about what you're watching now. Um, so.
Yeah. I'll have a list. And by the way, because I went to Medieval Times on Saturday, I walked in yesterday, Sunday, to trivia wearing my Medieval Times crown, which
Wow.
doubled the trivia crown for I Am King. But heavy fuck
Heavy
it.
is the crown.
Heavyweight heavy lies.
Heavy hangs the head that wears the crown. Get it right. Come
Guys,
on.
thank you. You're the one who's supposed to be tired. God, Rick. Thank you.
You woke me up and now I'm fucked. But anyway.
I appreciate that.
No, because it was a wonderful chat. Thank you, gentlemen.
Take my crown. Take it.
Anytime you want to have me back, drop me a line, and vice versa. If something comes up, I'm like, you know what? Matt and Lowell will be fun to talk to about this topic. I'll hit you up.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Rick. And from all of us here at Macabre Daily, be good, stay safe, fuck fascists, and watch more horror movies. Adios.
Peace.
That's right.